Howdy folks, today I'm excited and I hope you are too, because today I can finally share and you can finally watch a video that's been years in the making. And not in just like a, I've been playing this series since the first game in 2007 sense of, years in the making. Though I have been playing since the first game. What I mean is, I started replaying the series and compiling my rankings in 2022 for this video. And then I wrote the script and recorded it in December 2023 after I had completed Mirage. And yet, here we are over 6 months later, mid-2024, and I'm just now publishing this video. Now that we're waiting for AC Shadows, I figured it's the perfect time to reflect on, rank, and tier list every mainline and major spin-off Assassin's Creed game in the series. So, I'm Kanaju, and this is every Assassin's Creed game ranked. Sponsored by the like button and in the comments section. That's right, folks. If you're new here, I publish hour-long videos without sponsors because I'm crazy, and that's why I don't have a lot of disposable income. Now, I know that some of y'all will complain about Chronicles and Nexus VR not being on this list. However, if we're all being 100% honest with ourselves, I'm guessing most of the people watching this video are like me, and y'all haven't played those games either, so I think we'll be okay. Maybe I'll do a follow-up video next year about those if I get around to getting a VR headset, but that'll depend on how well this video does, I suppose. We'll see. So I'm going in chronological order and simultaneously ranking and tier listing every title. So I'll place each title in a tier, such as A tier, B tier, C tier, etc. And then I'll also rank it on a list, a numbered list. It should be fun. I'm also avoiding major story spoilers, so hopefully you can watch risk-free. One last note, I'm sticking to the single-player content for each game for obvious reasons. Oh yeah, and since everything after this intro was recorded in 2023, when I say this year, I mean 2023, right, throughout the video. And when I say last year, that probably means 2022. Now, I don't remember how often that comes up, but you get the idea. You're smart. Alright, let's begin. Assassin's Creed 2007. Oh boy. I love this game growing up. I mean, I still enjoy it. 2007 was a pivotal year for gaming, and Assassin's Creed was no small part of that. I'd never played a game like Assassin's Creed up to that point. I mean, no one had. And while its gameplay is simple, maybe even a little clunky by today's standards, it was a revelation. Back in the day. Free running across rooftops, parrying attacks, climbing towers, jumping off. It was incredible. While the structure of gameplay was pretty repetitive, I never grew bored of messing around the open cities. Dealing with beggars, drunks, unstable folks, guards, and others made for a more dynamic cityscape than I think even some more recent games. It did a great job of establishing the universe of Assassins and Templars and the first civilization. It also set a strong foundation for cities in the series. Overall, I'd say it was a strong first step forward. Now to place it on the tier list. Here's how I use my tiers. F is obviously a real stinker. No fun to play, bad story, poor graphics, lame world design, etc. D is below average, so weak story and gameplay, etc. C is average. It's not bad. C is average. But it's also not great, right? It's a decent entry into the series, worth playing even. B is above average. It's good, maybe even great. A tier games are my favorites. I had a lot of fun playing them. They have engaging stories, exciting worlds to explore, all that stuff. And S tier is reserved for titles that kind of transcend the series itself. These titles feature my favorite settings, gameplay, characters, and stories, all presented at a high quality level. Now, I'm placing Assassin's Creed in B tier for baseline. Not bad. It's good, above average. Trust me, it'll make more sense as we go. And of course, Assassin's Creed also defaults to number 1 on the ranking since it's the only game there so far. So let's fix that. Assassin's Creed 2, 2009. Oh boy, the CG trailer for this game was probably the most hyped thing I'd ever seen up to that point in my life. Back then, YouTube on TVs wasn't really a thing, so you could download game trailers directly to your PlayStation from the PlayStation Store. And let me tell you, I still have that trailer on my PS3. I watched that thing on repeat back in the day. Amazingly, the game actually lived up to the hype too. The story was personal, the main protagonist likable, the gameplay improved, and the game world even more fun to explore. There are more stealth opportunities, more weapons, more customization, more characters, more locations, more variety, more everything. And practically every weak aspect of the first game was addressed and improved. Even the present day storyline became more prominent. Ezio's one of my favorite protagonists, and a gaming icon all his own. While I would still consider the free running janky by today's standards, and let's be honest, which Assassin's Creed doesn't have janky movement? And don't you dare say Unity, Anywho, Assassin's Creed 2, it's an easy S tier game. Easily. Some fans even believe the series peaked with Assassin's Creed 2. I don't personally agree, but I can see where they're coming from. It's a great game. As far as ranking goes, this obviously sits above the original game. It was just better in practically every way. So how do you follow up such a success? Well, rather than move on directly to the third numbered title with the new era and protagonist, Ubisoft opted to continue Ezio's story in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, 2010. This was also the beginning of their annual release schedule. When I first played and beat AC Brotherhood, I honestly wasn't that impressed. It seemed like a step down from the more ambitious AC2. Luckily, I replayed it last year, I think, and it's actually a fantastic entry in the series. It was the first of what some folks call the quote-unquote city games. That is, games that primarily take place in a single, large city. Rome, during the Italian Renaissance, is the perfect city to set such a game. Ancient Roman structures give the city a more layered character than anything we'd seen before. There are underground dungeons to explore, strongholds to liberate, and shops to upgrade. By the time you beat the game, you feel like a resident of this simulated Rome, familiar with its every street and column. Gameplay also felt noticeably smoother than the second game. The most noteworthy addition, though, is the ability to train and utilize your own Brotherhood of Assassins. I loved upgrading my team and using them to overpower otherwise difficult situations. It's the game's story being reflected in gameplay. That's cool. They also introduced multiplayer, but since this was the era of online passes and I bought a used copy since, I didn't have money, well, I didn't get to play the online mode. Regardless, I'm placing AC Brotherhood in A tier. I think it's a great game, better than the first, though perhaps less impressive compared to AC2. So it's ranked in the middle for now. While Ubisoft continued to work on AC3 and the new Anvil Next game engine, they released the finale to Ezio's story on the original game's engine. Assassin's Creed Revelations released in 2011 after only about a year of development. And let me tell you, it shows.
I cannot believe it.
Let me see.
Later!
What?
Revelations is my least favorite game of the Ezio trilogy. Its story is its strongest element, wrapping up both Ezio's and Altair's stories in a satisfying manner. However, the rest of the game falls a bit short for me.
Oh my gosh, that's the second time!
Historical tourism is one of my favorite aspects of the Assassin's Creed series, and unfortunately, Constantinople doesn't live up to its potential. It feels cramped and chaotic, and with the exception of the Hagia Sophia, its landmarks feel scaled down and missable. It doesn't feel like the remnants of a grand Roman city in the same sense that, Rome did, Not to mention that one underground chasm is the least realistic thing I've ever seen in Assassin's Creed, other than... Howdy folks, Future Kanaju here. So I forgot to get footage of this giant chasm. I found screenshots in the portfolio of the artist who created it, so now I feel bad about making fun of it. So let this serve as a reminder that all the games we see are made by people, real people, who are proud of their work and did their best. And this game was created in less than a year, so they probably worked fast too. That said, I still think it's wildly unrealistic. But before you take a dump on someone else's work, just remember it is someone else's work. Constructive criticism, though, is a good thing, so don't be afraid to criticize. Speaking of which, let me get back to my critique of AC Revelations.
Think about it though. How is all of this under the city? Under the river? Between two large bodies of water? That part of the world is prone to earthquakes. Why would they build their largest city over a giant chasm when they could build it on solid land anywhere else? And how is that chasm not flooded when it's under the water table? I don't get it.
Not to mention that one underground chasm is like the least realistic thing I've ever seen in Assassin's Creed, other than maybe the underground city of Cappadocia that's also in the game. Now, the underground dwellings of the real Cappadocia are closer to a series of hallways and rooms than like a full city of buildings somehow underground. I mean, they really played it fast and loose with their cities in this game. Traversal is mostly better though, with the hook blade making climbing faster than before and ziplines being a lot of fun to use. However, combat doesn't feel improved to me. The hidden gun is still a fun finisher, but otherwise, I found enemies more frustrating to fight than previous titles. Bombs and crafting also didn't improve the experience much for me. Invincible gun nests and tower defense mechanics are also new additions that luckily never made a return in the series. Overall, I enjoyed Ezio's story immensely. However, I didn't care to keep exploring the world after I had completed the game. I did enjoy multiplayer though, funny enough. I played as the Jester since I got the GameStop edition, but multiplayer doesn't really factor into these rankings. I just thought I'd mention it. So, this may seem harsh, don't hate me, but I would put Revelations in C tier. C being average, remember, not bad, average. The game felt like its engine was over-encumbered by increased detail, and its mechanics were beginning to feel outdated due to all the recycled animations. I'm also going to slide it just below the original Assassin's Creed in the rankings. So, after Revelations, it was finally time to release the next numbered title in the new Anvil Next game engine, with 2012's Assassin's Creed 3. Now, let me tell you, I was just as hyped for AC3's trailers as AC2's, if not more so. As an American, the idea of a game set in revolutionary America really appealed to me. A Native American protagonist also resonated with me. When the game was released, I honestly could not believe how great it looked. It was still on the PS3, right, same as the other titles, but it felt like a generational leap in graphics. It still looks great to this day. It was night and day from the old games. The animations were all new and they were so fluid. Combat animations especially are still my favorite in the entire series. You can link together so many actions seamlessly and take multiple enemies at once. Parkour felt fast and we could now navigate trees and rock faces. Ship combat was an excellent addition that worked so much better than I think anyone expected. The colonial cities were dense, lively, and detailed, though perhaps not as fun to explore as Venice or Rome. I enjoyed playing as both Connor and Haytham. I enjoyed the tomahawk. I even enjoyed hunting, in moderation. I enjoyed most things about the game. Train networks, not at all, but those were easy to ignore. We also got some of my favorite present-day missions in the entire series. I felt like an actual modern-day assassin for perhaps the only time in the series. The story was a bit all over the place, and having Connor steer the horse that Paul Revere rides was definitely contrived.
We'll have to ride together. I'll guide you towards those we need to alert. Follow my directions, and we'll be done in no time. To the left, Connor!
But overall, I enjoyed the game immensely. Oh yeah, and the homestead was cool too. I maintain to this day that Connor is by far the most powerful assassin in combat. That man could cut down whole armies. So badass. So, AC3 is an easy S rank in my book. I realize a lot of folks didn't like the conclusion of Desmond's story. Wasn't my favorite either. But honestly, I rarely enjoy the present day parts of any Assassin's Creed game all that much. They pull me out of the action and away from the badass protagonist I purchased the game to play as. When AC3 pulled me out of the Animus to do badass assassin stuff in modern day cities though, well, I honestly didn't mind. I don't think that's too hot of a take. What is though is that I'm ranking AC3 above AC2. Now keep in mind that this is my personal biased opinion as an American who has walked the Freedom Trail in Boston and seen a lot of those landmarks in real life. But I also think that AC3 plays better than AC2, has better combat, better stealth, better vehicle gameplay, better modern day gameplay. And while Connor may not be as iconic of a protagonist as Ezio, not by a long shot, he's always been one of my favorites. I just think he has a more compelling story than people give him credit for. And he's also more of a character than people give him credit for. Anyways, 2013 brought us Assassin's Creed 4, Black Flag. Previously, we thought that numbered entries brought us forward in time, while spin-offs contributed to established time periods. Black Flag went back in time a little, and it also had a subtitle like one of the spin-offs for some reason. It also didn't continue Desmond's story, so it's still kind of weird calling this Assassin's Creed 4. I think just Black Flag fits much better. So I loved Black Flag. It was my and many others' dream pirate game. Vast oceans to explore, the ability to land on various islands, and anchor at various points. Ship combat was perfect, with an expanded arsenal of weapons and upgrades to acquire. I loved boarding ships, I loved taking over forts, I loved sailing the seas with shanties in my sails. While overall I would consider the locations and cities of Black Flag inferior to earlier entries, Havana stands out as a most worthy addition to the series canon. Combat got worse somehow from AC3. There's less weapon variety, less animations, and less chance of you doing these sick double kills. You do get more guns though, which I like. Stealth is actually improved, at least for me, though the trailing missions really sucked. Story-wise, Black Flag has some strong characters, but due to the vast scope of the game, I would often go long stretches without making real progress, which made it a little tougher to follow. Even replaying it again recently, I was too distracted by the open world to properly follow the story. The modern day stuff also really drags. You just built the greatest pirate simulation of all time, right? Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. Now let me play it. I don't care about nameless Abstergo employee. I bought the game to play as Edward Kenway, so let me do that. Now don't hate me, but I'm placing Black Flag in A tier. While the ship gameplay is second to none, second to one, the on-foot gameplay often feels like a step down from AC3. The graphics always looked worse to me too. The water's awesome, but like character models and cities, I don't know, I think AC3 looked better. Anyways, I don't have to justify this. A is a great tier and Black Flag is a great game. In fact, I'm ranking it above AC Brotherhood. Oh shoot. Okay, I forgot about Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation. I did play it though. It was originally released on the PlayStation Vita in 2012, but I've only played the HD remaster on PS4 this past year. Now let me just say that I was pleasantly surprised. The story is ass, and the graphics aren't impressive, but good golly, the central mechanic of changing personas? Excellent. Different outfits grant you access to different social interactions as well as weapons, equipment, and agility. Purchasing real estate around town gives you more places to change outfits, which encourages using that mechanic even more often. Speaking of which, Colonial New Orleans is a fantastic Assassin's Creed city. I love it. The Bayou in Mexico are less interesting, but New Orleans? Bravo. It's a smaller package than most other games, but it packs a lot of fun into that. Plus, it recycles the combat from AC3, which, as you know, I love. All of that said, I'm putting it in B tier, above average. While it has some great mechanics, it also has a lame story, characters, and some other lame sequences that contribute to it feeling like a spin-off. It also lacks polish, I'll say. That said, I wish they'd have figured out a way to bring the Persona system to future titles, as I really enjoyed it. As for rankings, I'm going to put it just below the original Assassin's Creed. While we're on the topic of spin-offs, Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry was first released as DLC for Black Flag, before it eventually got its own standalone release in 2014. Honestly, I love playing Freedom Cry. Sure, it's a tiny game compared to Black Flag, but that's not a bad thing. The combat mechanics from Black Flag feel tighter somehow, and Adewale is a fun character to play. Clearing plantations is extremely satisfying. The story felt like it wanted to say more, but didn't. The main city, Port-au-Prince, is tiny, but it works well for illustrating the injustice Adewale is fighting. That said, it's so small that you cannot cross it without triggering multiple quote-unquote random events. The same ones in the same places every time. It gets repetitive fast. And yeah, I could just ignore them, but given what the events are, I mean, come on, I can't just ignore them. Overall, Freedom Cry feels like DLC. Its story feels isolated and its scope is unambitious. Still, it's not a bad time. I'm putting it in C tier and ranking it below Revelations because there's just not much to it. So 2014 was a pretty big year for Assassin's Creed releases. Besides the standalone Freedom Cry, we also got Assassin's Creed Rogue, another game considered a spin-off by some. Funny enough though, Rogue feels a lot more like a mainline game than you'd expect. By this point, the modern day story had taken a back seat, but Rogue's story somehow succeeds at setting up the events of both Assassin's Creed 3 and Assassin's Creed Unity, and I'd recommend any fan of the series give it a shot if you haven't already. The ship combat is evolved from AC4. Open world exploration is improved with better locations to discover and explore. There's more variety in oceans. New York is actually better in Rogue than in AC3, and it even has better parkour mechanics. I also think Shay's air rifle and grenade launcher are good additions to the arsenal. Exploring the Templar side of the story, having to counter assassins, is also a novel twist that works. Overall, it feels like a sequel to Black Flag. It's not even that much smaller than Black Flag, to be honest. It has enough content to be a full-price game. That said though, I don't think the cast of Rogue is all that memorable. And while exploring the more wild parts of the North Atlantic can be fun, having one of the game's two cities be somewhat recycled from AC3, that does take away from the experience of visiting a new place, you know. In other words, it's a surprisingly great game that feels maybe a little too familiar. You know what? I was going to put it in B tier originally, but recounting all the good stuff it does, it's kind of made me reconsider. I could see it in A tier. You know, I think that's fair. I'll rank it just below Brotherhood. Alright, now on to the main event of 2014. Assassin's Creed Unity. Unity was the first game of the new console generation. Running on Anvil Next 2.0, it promised visuals, crowds, and combat, the likes of which we'd never seen in the series before. Now, I can confirm that Paris is indeed beautiful. It's one of the greatest cities ever simulated in an Assassin's Creed game, easily. The crowds are large, if choppy, and combat animations do have a certain pizzazz to them. However, I don't think Unity is a great game. The story feels disjointed. The characters on both sides are forgettable. I just played through it like a month ago and I can't remember most of the characters. I remember Napoleon, Arno, Elise. The assassins are jerks for no reason. There's almost no mission variety. It's all about sneaking into a large building, then either killing, stealing, or rescuing someone through narrow corridors. Which would be fine, except the stealth in this game kinda sucks. The AI are brain dead, they don't react to someone dying right next to them. And then if you start combat, you're dead in a couple seconds, at least through most of the game. Now, I love how clean combat can look in the hands of a professional, but in my hands, it looks and feels terrible. I can't tell when I'm taking damage, or if I've dealt it. They forgot to include proper damage indicators. Sometimes I would take hits while stuck in a killing animation that I couldn't cancel. I died mostly from not realizing I had low health. I died so many times not even knowing I had taken a hit yet. Enemy guns are overpowered because you can't use human shields as in AC3, or dodge them like in Syndicate. You can't whistle while stealthing, which is an incredible omission. And no, cherry bombs do not attract anyone's attention. Look at this. Bodies disappear automatically, so you can't carry them. Medicine is way overpriced for the slow drip feed of cash you get in the main game.
At least in Bioshock it makes sense, because it's like your wallet's full. It's like, okay, wallets are like, it's what you're carrying with you, but this is a chest in a building. You can fit a second one. It's only 80 francs? No, this... Oh.
A letter arrived for you. I left it in your room.
I beat the game broke from refilling my consumables all the time. Combat feels sluggish, with there often feeling like a second or so's delay between your button press and Arno's action. And maybe there isn't a delay, but it always feels sluggish. And for some reason, the rifle is the most effective tool in my stealth arsenal. I kid you not, look at this.
Who's coming after Jack? The hell. Who saw what happened? Where'd the bang come from? Shit, where'd that come from?
And you know what? Slight exception, light spoilers, but here's me using my disguise ability to copy the appearance of the boss of the game in an empty room in order to walk up to him looking like himself and and attack him. I mean, it's just so dumb. I didn't enjoy playing Unity, honestly. It's the only AC game that I didn't enjoy playing. And in fact, I didn't have almost any fun until I got to the Dead Kings DLC, which occurred after I had already beat the game. Now, the DLC gives out so much money that I was finally able to afford weapons and gear that made the game more playable. Plus, I could afford to refill my consumables after every mission. I genuinely loved playing through the DLC, and I did a bunch of bonus content in that city. The game's main saving grace, though, besides its 3 excellent cities, which, if you know me, I love a good city, its main saving grace was the parkour. It's fast, it's cool looking, it's intuitive. It's just as jank as ever, but it's fun. And that's what's important to me in gameplay system, that it's fun. Overall, I love certain parts of Unity. Its character customization's the best in the series, and its cities are great. But on the other hand, it feels like it was designed not to be fun. I don't know, I hated lockpicking until I reached lockpicking level 3. But I hate that there are 3 levels of lockpicking that eat up valuable skill points. And they're more essential to stealth than you would be led to believe. I hate that upgrading my health multiple times doesn't stop basic enemies from killing me in 2 seconds. I hate that most of the game feels like it takes place crouched behind couches and boring interiors. And do not even get me started on the cover system. Just look at me try and cross this little... You see... I'm pressing X and X and having to... It's just silly. And then, okay, look at this map. Look at this map. Now, it always took me like a minute to actually find my main mission objective. Can you spot my main mission objective? I'll give you a few seconds. Don't worry, take your time. I realize it's kind of difficult. Alright, did you find it? Okay. If you guessed under this other icon, you're correct. Good job. Sheesh, I sound annoyed. I'm sorry, folks. I'm passionate about Assassin's Creed. Obviously. Sometimes I let that passion get the better of me. So anyway, Unity goes in C tier. Now, I'm sorry for those of you that really love Unity, but not even the technical state it was in, which I'm sure must have been bad, but I was too poor to play it back then. But even playing it on PS5, it's just, it has so much potential, and they just didn't realize it. It's really frustrating. But despite all my complaints, I'm not going to put it anywhere lower than C tier. I mean, even at its worst, Assassin's Creed usually isn't that bad. It's not F tier bad or even D tier bad at, I think, any point. That said, I didn't enjoy Unity for most of my playtime. It is one of the coolest worlds in the series to explore, but actually playing it felt like a chore. That rhymes. I suppose I'll put it just below Revelations, but honestly, the city of Paris is way cooler than Constantinople, but I can't pretend Arno's story is better than Ezio's and Revelations, so there it goes. Alright, I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit. This is a long video. But here we are in 2015, and franchise fatigue is setting in. We've gotten so many Assassin's Creed games since 2009, of varying quality, that folks aren't automatically hyped like they used to be. Which is pretty sad, because Assassin's Creed Syndicate is one of the best games in the series. For me, anyways. Seriously, Victorian London's perhaps the most fully realized city of any game in the series. Fry twins are decent protagonists, the historical characters you meet are fun and plentiful, and the villains are over the top. The story's fun, the gameplay's solid, the graphics are excellent. I don't know, they did a great job. London especially feels more like a character than the cities in most games. The River Thames is the best river in the entire series. There are trains roaming the map, actual traffic and vehicles to commandeer. And I don't care what anyone says, but I love the rope launcher. I acknowledge how impossible and nonsensical it is. I know, but listen, London's huge, its streets are wide, and its buildings are tall. This game would be so tedious if I had to climb every single building manually. And granted, you have the option to climb every building manually if you want, but you'll soon discover these things are really tall. So if I have the option between that or getting around like a Victorian Spider-Man, I'm picking the latter. I also like the assassination missions in this game, like 100 times better than Unity's. Side content's more fun here, plus we can take control of the map like we could in AC3 or Black Flag or Rogue. Jacob and Evie, they're not the best characters in the series, but I do appreciate their separate approaches to gameplay and customization. Sure, I can still stealth a whole building as Jacob, and yeah, I can still shred enemies as Evie, but when played to their respective strengths, they do make the game even better, aka easier. Now, I have to admit a slight bias in favor of Syndicate. I have a thing for Victorian settings. BioShock Infinite, one of my favorite games of all time. And let me tell you, Ubisoft actually nailed the setting to the point where Victorian London stands out as just one of the greatest video game settings of all time for me. It's just so well executed. So I'm putting it in... this is killing me. A+ tier? Listen, I know after all the praise, A tier does seem low, but I already have a complete list here, and I don't know if I want to put too many games in S tier, you know? Well, for now, I'll just put it in A+, I can always move it, right? And for rankings, I'm going to put it just below AC2. So, if you're one of those people who love the original games and hate the new ones, you might be getting a bad feeling right now, because I'm a man who enjoys all of Assassin's Creed. Well, except for, most of Unity's story, but otherwise all of Assassin's Creed. Regardless of how you feel though, if you've made it this far, you're probably one of the few, so if you wouldn't mind leaving a like on the video, or a dislike, that's fair. I'd appreciate it. Took way too long to make this, and I kind of doubt many people will watch it at all, so every like helps. Alright, time to move on to the next era of Assassin's Creed. So after Syndicate underperformed sales-wise, it was clear to Ubisoft that fans were getting tired of the same old formula. So for the first time since 2008, they took a year off, and they didn't release a mainline game in 2016. They returned in 2017 with something completely new, unlike any Assassin's Creed we'd seen before. Assassin's Creed Origins was a dramatic departure from what fans had come to expect. I mean, not that dramatic a departure. Its story focused on uncovering a vast conspiracy involving first civilization technology and corrupt political leaders. It took place in a historical setting in the Middle East. You wear a white hood, you have a hidden blade. There are assassins bureaus, you have parkour, stealth, assassination missions, huge cities, badass protagonists with a compelling story. Wait, why was this a departure again? Oh yeah, the map is the size of a country. It takes place in ancient Egypt, combat is now hitbox based, and there's loot. No, not the loot that's been a big part of the series since Assassin's Creed 2, but like meaningful loot. Now, if you're me, which I am, this is your dream game. I was obsessed with ancient Egypt growing up. Yes, I watched the mummy movies, but I also studied the architecture of Egyptian tombs and temples. And let me tell you, this is as close to an ancient Egypt simulator as I could ask for. At least from Ubisoft, right? NPCs have daily routines, animals live along the Nile. You can see caravans and ships carrying goods across the landscape and seascape. There are pyramids to explore, wonders of the ancient world to climb, and a world so immersive I still can't believe it really exists. Like, in my PlayStation, that is. Plus the Discovery Tour. Oh man, this game is awesome. Not to mention the bird. The bird, Sue. This is my single favorite new addition to any of the Assassin's Creed games in the last few years. I wish they could go back and add it to previous titles, in fact, just so I could see the cities from above. Ugh, it's like a dream. Now, I'm not naive. I understand a lot of old-timers really didn't enjoy the jump to the new open world format. Something about open landscapes not being as fun a setting as more urban games. However, they obviously didn't spend enough time in the cities of AC Origins because they're some of my favorites in the whole series. I made a whole video just exploring the interconnected underground tunnels of Memphis, for crying out loud. A 30-minute video just going through the tunnels. I mean, these are some compelling cities full of variety and scale, and gameplay and stories. Yeah, most of the map isn't urban, but there are more cities with more variety to explore here than think any game prior. Crocodilopolis, Siwa, Cyrene, Memphis, Alexandria, and plenty of smaller towns and villages. Plus Thebes in the DLC. Great city, Thebes. Of course, Alexandria is no Paris, but it's full of the characters, main story beats, collectibles, and side activities you'd expect from a proper Assassin's Creed city. Not to mention, memorable set pieces. For my money, it's better than Constantinople. And don't even get me started on stealth, because I know some people like to pretend that stealth was tossed aside for the new combat model, but I never felt that way. I'd spend like 45 minutes observing a camp, tracking every soldier, and biding my time to strike. I'd be sure to attack at night, right, when most of the guards are asleep, and they only ran a skeleton crew. I'd hide bodies, attack from the bushes. If I left a body out, guards would react and search for me. And if they gave up, they'd move the body instead of just leaving it where it was, right? Hell, I could whistle, which is more than I could say about Unity. I enjoyed stealth so much more in this game than I had in a while. Now, I know many of you will disagree, which is fine, so please let me know, your issues with it in the comments below. I genuinely liked it, but then again, I do recall something about stealth damage being an issue. You couldn't automatically assassinate higher level enemies, right? I mean, right now, my character in the game is really high level, so I don't run into that issue, but that could definitely be frustrating. Though I tended to also spec into assassin skills, so maybe, and I also crafted like upgrades for my blade, so maybe I didn't run into that issue as much as some others. Now, I could probably go on for hours about how much I enjoyed most things in the game. Yeah, the leveling system definitely sucks if you want to blaze through the story, but other than that, I think the game was pretty great. Bayek is a compelling lead, and cutscenes look better here than in later games. I don't know, Origins just feels like it was made with a lot of love, and I enjoyed it. That's just my opinion though, no worries if yours is different. Speaking of my opinion though, I'm placing Origins in S tier. I still go back to it semi-regularly, and I really enjoy it each time. It's an incredible technical and artistic achievement, and a great Assassin's Creed game too. Now don't hate, we're all fans of Assassin's Creed here, but I'm placing it right here at the top of the list. I'm sorry, it's just if I could only keep one Assassin's Creed game for the rest of my life, where I am right now, I would say it would be Origins. There's a lot of content, and it's well made, and that's not even counting the DLC, which is pretty good too. If you keep an open mind, Origins is an incredible game on its own, with memorable characters, stories, great set pieces, polish, production value, an incredible setting. It's really cool. So, if you're still here after all that, thank you. I must warn you though, the takes only get hotter from here. Well, they're not actually hotter, since the newer games are technically more popular than the old ones, but hotter in that some folks will probably disagree more vehemently. So anyways, in 2018, we got Assassin's Creed Odyssey, another country-sized open world, and even further back in time, ancient Greece, about 500 BCE or so. Now, I 100% understand why folks don't consider this a good Assassin's Creed game. There is political intrigue, right, and first civilization stuff, but there aren't any actual assassins. No, this guy doesn't count. Well, maybe, but you don't get a white hood, right? You get a black one, and this blue one. No. You don't get a hidden blade. No Assassin's Bureaus. No Assassin's Creed, really. And you know what? Fair enough. That said, Odyssey's interpretation of ancient Greece is perhaps the greatest open world I've ever experienced. And before you complain about a lot of empty space, which, believe me, most of it is not, but before you complain, just know that I'm pretty sure this game has more area devoted to cityscapes than any other Assassin's Creed game. Well, Syndicate might have more actually, and if you count all 3 cities in Unity, that one might beat it too. But what I'm getting at is that you can spend dozens of hours just in the cities alone. There are 37 designated cities and dozens more villages, ports, settlements, and sanctuaries, with plenty of urban gameplay to go around. And if you're one of those people who insists all of these cities are copy and paste, please watch my top 10 cities in AC Odyssey after this. They're really not copy and paste. If you slow down and look around, I think you'll see that they're anything but soulless. Admittedly though, these cities mostly suck for rooftop traversal or parkour. Athens especially has a lot of spread out, low-rise buildings.
It's a shame that
the game with the worst parkour has more cities than any other game in the series. Still, I love the cities in this game. I also love the adventure, the myriad islands, the concept of the Greek world. For historical tourists like me, it's just an incredible thing to behold. And yeah, it's a bit fanciful and unrealistic in its depictions, but on the whole, it's such a compelling interpretation to explore. And I haven't even talked gameplay yet. I'll keep it brief. Combat is crazy and focused on offense and dodging, as opposed to the slower parry-based combat of earlier games. I like it, but it's definitely not my favorite. Stealth isn't much worse than Origins, but there's less of a focus on it. That said, I relied heavily on stealth to avoid drawing the attention of passing mercenaries. Assassinations are actually kind of awesome. I missed the blade, of course, but tracking targets across the map based on clues I collected
myself,
that's a great feeling. The loot game did go too far though. I agree for sure. Clearing inventory and scrapping stuff, that isn't fun. Parkour? Now that's really the core element that's the most neglected here. It's a shame, but most cities just aren't that tall or that dense. So I can see the decision they made to like simplify it even further, but I don't know. I wish it was better. However, the map being broken into city-states with leaders you can replace if you so choose, the ability to assassinate the person who placed a bounty on you, ancient ship combat, ancient Greek myths come to life, all of that stuff, that's excellent. Last point before I rank it, I love Cassandra. Based on the choices I made, she's one of my
Favorite.
protagonists in the whole series, full stop. So many adventures together. I also got to see much of her life, similar to like Ezio. Funny enough, this is also the game that got me to care about Layla Hassan, the new modern day protagonist for the 3 open world games. So I suppose there is an assassin in this game after all. But again, not counting this guy. So where do I rank such a game? No. Don't hate me. S. Now before you click away, let me just say, while Odyssey is my favorite action RPG of all time, it is not my favorite Assassin's Creed of all time. I'm ranking it below Assassin's Creed 2 in this ranking. Alright, one more open world game to go, and it's easily the most infamous. You already know I'm talking about 2020's Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Valhalla's marketing reminds me a lot of Mirage's marketing. Turn of social stealth, smaller scope, yada yada. But holy free holy, this game's story is the most bloated thing I have ever played. It took me over 80 hours to get through the main quest. Holy moly. But there are like, and then there are like 3 endings, and not like alternative endings, but like after you think the game is over, there's actually there's more story and another ending, and then more story and another ending. And that's not even counting the last chapter's ending. Combat is also janky as hell, but it's full of customization. Maybe the most flexible combat in the series. It's this or Odyssey, I think. Or maybe Unity, but that one's not fun. Parkour is actually better than Odyssey, but it's not great, right? It still feels kind of sluggish, I suppose, to match Eivor's build. And while there are parkour routes in every city, I think people kind of forget that about Valhalla. Overall, it's still not the
Experience.
I think most fans wanted from parkour. Now, one thing big games media won't tell you is that stealth is actually better in this game. You see, most cities are suspicious of Vikings like Eivor, much like cities were suspicious of Altair in AC1, so you have to hide your weapons under your cloak. You can blend in at a table or in a market stall, you can sit on benches or lure drunks, you can hide among cloaked monks. There are even black box assassination missions in the free and paid DLCs that involve disguises and other forms of social stealth. I'm not kidding, I did a lot of stealthing in this game. All of my own volition, mind you, because this is the easiest Assassin's Creed game I've ever played. I think I only died twice during my first 100 or so hours on normal. And trust me, I'm like average skill level at best, so that's really easy. I really liked Eivor as a character too. I played male Eivor, and I still cannot believe he's not the canon one, because his voice actor absolutely nails it. I actually enjoyed the side activities too. I played so much Orlog that I actually bought a real life version. I enjoyed flighting in every town I could, and even drinking games grew on me. I loved raiding places for treasure. Unlike when you rob people's houses as Ezio, a rich nobleman, it didn't feel at odds with my character, who is in fact a Viking. A noble Viking in many respects, but a Viking nonetheless. I liked the supporting cast, I liked the impact my decisions made on the story. Maybe not as much impact as Odyssey, but still, I felt like the choices I had made over 80 hours were recognized in the final quests. The story felt like absolute nonsense most of the time, if I'm being real, but seeing the rise of the assassin's greatest rivals, that was pretty interesting. Oh yeah, and I hated the Asgard and Jotunheim stuff. Wish they had taken those resources and just put them into making England or even Norway or something better. Seriously, they spent all those resources making new enemies, new mechanics, new landscapes and architecture, that I just genuinely think bog the game down and make it worse. Kills the pacing, it doesn't advance your character's progression at all, I don't know. And then they made a $40 DLC. $40. Which they described as, quote, the most ambitious expansion in franchise history, end quote. And it's entirely set in this Norse fairy tale. Why? I get that the team was probably tired of creating amazing historical simulations, but why? The other 2 DLCs were so great. I wish we'd just gotten like more of that, you know what I mean? In case you're wondering though, no, I didn't play Dawn of Ragnarok, and I honestly don't plan to. I already have God of War for my Norse mythology action-adventure game fix. And I'm with the old-timers on this one that it just doesn't feel like Assassin's Creed at all. Speaking of DLC though, Valhalla actually had excellent post-launch support. We got to visit medieval Ireland and France, the Isle of Skye, we got river raids, seasonal festivals, and more. I forgot to mention the crossover event that also occurred in both Odyssey and Valhalla. I personally preferred the Odyssey bonus DLC since it came with a new city to explore, but both were fun, free additions. The first 2 paid DLCs for Valhalla were great too. Running your own trade empire in Ireland works surprisingly well, and medieval Paris is one of the best cities in the game. Overall, I actually really ended up enjoying Valhalla. Not all the time, I took like a 1-year break and then returned to it. And I didn't enjoy every part of it, but on the whole, I enjoy going back to it every now and again. I enjoy its emerald hills and its Roman ruins. I like the stealth and easy as pie combat. I don't know, it's my least favorite of the open world games, and I hate its mythical maps. But I still had a lot of fun just exploring its medieval world. I don't know. So it's going in A tier, and I'm ranking it below Syndicate. How can I justify placing it above Black Flag though, right? You know what? I don't know if I can justify that. It's gonna go below. Oh wait, but how can I justify placing it above Brotherhood? Recency bias, baby! Woohoo! Alright, moving on. We've arrived at the most recent title, 2023's Assassin's Creed Mirage. I struggled for weeks to write a review or a critique about this game. I kept writing and tossing out what I had and getting tripped up. I don't know, it's complicated. I like this game, I enjoy this game. I do not believe it lived up to the marketing. Like, yes, we returned to the Middle East, right? Hooray! As if Origins didn't take place in the Middle East and Odyssey wasn't, like, adjacent to the Middle East. I mean, look at the city on the island of Crete. It's in a region called Little Egypt. But, I mean, yay, we're back! Finally, we're focusing on an intimate story about the Assassin Brotherhood. You know, like Origins! And I would even argue Bayek's story is a lot more compelling than Bassett. But, I mean, you have your White Hood again, right? Sweet. Like in Origins. I suppose Odyssey and Valhalla also have hoods, with Valhalla especially having whole stealth mechanics tied to your hood, but they weren't assassin hoods, right? Well, some of them were, but... So, bad. You also have your hidden blade, again like Valhalla. You have social stealth, like Valhalla, except you can't sit on every bench like you can in Valhalla, or blend in market stalls like Valhalla. But you know what you can do? You can disappear into the crowd, like this. The focus is on stealth this time, which, that's actually pretty cool, except that I kind of feel like they gutted combat to make it that way. Now, I actually don't hate it. I did originally hate the combat for like the first 30 hours, but the last 6 or so hours, I've finally begun to enjoy it. Of course, that means I didn't enjoy it for the length of the main story, but it's not as bad as Unity's. It's significantly more limited than every other game in the series except maybe the first one. And again, I didn't like it for the length of the campaign, but I can definitely see why some people don't hate it. It's simple like the first game's combat, it's also parry-based like the first game's combat. However, after 15 years of expanding combat, it feels kinda bland in comparison. At least it works though, looking at you, Unity. The skill tree is much cleaner, which I like, though it still doesn't feel satisfying to upgrade. I think Origins handled bird perception better, and Syndicate's progression felt more meaningful. More tools than ever before? Sounds pretty awesome. Except I can't have sleep darts and berserk darts at the same time. There's always a catch. Once again, I kind of hated tools for the first 20 or so hours of the game. The throwing knives were great, of course, but the noise makers and traps felt kind of useless until they were upgraded. The blow darts have always been a favorite of mine since Black Flag. However, being limited to a single ammo type felt like a step backwards. I will say though, after beating the game and upgrading all of my tools, I finally understood how to make the most of them. You see, contract missions clearly tell you what your goals and bonus objectives are, so I could tune my arsenal to be either lethal or non-lethal depending on the contract. In past games, you'd simply have all of your tools available to you at once. In Mirage though, you sort of build your loadout to the mission, and that's actually pretty cool, assuming you know enough about your next mission and don't mind the clunky menu navigation. Those two obstacles meant I pretty much never touched the tool settings after I upgraded it initially. It wasn't until the endgame that I was willing to sift through every option, every mission. I also didn't have all of the options until the endgame, so that gave me more freedom to experiment with. It's not a bad system, it's just clunky and I would say poorly incentivized. Guards are dumb as rocks after all. They don't have detailed day-night routines like Origins, and I don't think I killed a single sleeping guard this entire game. You also can't knock people out without special non-lethal tools. That meant I ended up killing a lot of Postal Bureau guards that I would have preferred not to. I mean, isn't the first tenet of the creed, stay your blade from the flesh of an innocent?
I stay my blade from the flesh of the innocent.
So, let me knock people out like the old games, is what I would say. I don't know. The reputation system also makes no sense. If a single guy notices me kill his friend, and then I kill him, that leaves no witnesses, right? Right? So then why do I have a reputation? I like the idea of the reputation system. Like, I don't mind it at all. It seemed like a lot of times I would get a reputation for doing something in a secluded area where there weren't any witnesses. Pickpocketing, though, that is excellent. Mwah. But why did they dumb down assassinations from Valhalla? I like the quick time event when killing high-level enemies. It made it seem like, okay, I'm positioning my blade just between the armor, right? Whereas low enemies, it's just a button press, and higher level enemies, but it's still a one-hit kill. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Black box assassinations, those are finally making their return. From Assassin's Creed Valhalla, that is. One of them is almost an exact copy of an assassination from Valhalla. You know the one, under the church. Well, this time it's under the House of Wisdom. Yeah, you know the one. Tell me that isn't the same mission, but with slightly less freedom. Also, no mission features disguises and social stealth with the same depth as this one in Valhalla. You had to keep your distance or pretend to work to keep up your disguise. There's nothing like that in Mirage. It's more akin to the disguise missions in Origins, where you put on a costume to enter an area, but otherwise act as you normally would. But hey, I can quote-unquote disappear in a crowd, so social stealth is back, baby. I do also love that some areas have archers, which can force your bird out of the air. That's actually a really smart addition. Enemy variety, though, is dumb as hell. Why are there flamethrower enemies, but no mounted enemies? I don't know. Valhalla had excellent enemy variety, and Mirage feels like a step back in many respects. But not all respects. Baghdad is an incredible city. It's beautiful and full of life. Sure, there are no ships in the rivers, and only a single ship docked in the port, which makes the city feel very dead compared to the cities of Origins, where you could actually see all this trade occurring. You never see caravans crossing the desert, despite a caravanserai being a notable location, so it's a bit disappointing in the immersion department. However, from a gameplay perspective, it blows Valhalla out of the water. Parkour is so much better. Still janky as ever, but much better than the past couple games. You can tell the city's the perfect playground for it too. Lots of opportunities and routes to explore. May not be as intricately interconnected as Memphis, or as realistically populated or architecturally varied as Alexandria, or even as varied as Jorvik, but it's easily one of my favorite cities to date. Beautiful to behold and fun to climb over. The desert around it's also enjoyable, though again, The world feels so much deader than that of Origins or Odyssey, where the roads between cities were always full of traffic, soldiers, traders, mercenaries, citizens, and the like. Basim's story was also a bit of a disappointment to me. I don't feel like it really added much to what we already learned in Valhalla, and I actually think Valhalla's story is more impactful to the Assassin-Templar conflict and canon than Mirage's is, at least where the story is right now. If you know, you know. Mirage also abandons the modern-day stuff outside of the opening cutscene. Meanwhile, Valhalla changed everything about the modern-day conflict. No spoilers, though. I don't know. I enjoy the smaller scope of Mirage, but I feel like they didn't add any depth in return for scaling it down. Parkour is better, but stealth and combat are simplified. Bonus points for more environmental kills, though. That's cool. That said, overall, the city feels less interactive than Valhalla's, small as they were. Loot is still here, but there's hardly any of it, and most of it's just upgrade schematics for the handful of items you can find. I don't know. I'm glad they tried it, but I don't think the trade-offs make it a better game than Odyssey or even Valhalla. Better Assassin's Creed game, maybe, but then Origins has it beat there too. Parkour is the best it's been since Unity or Syndicate, hands down, but otherwise I'll keep the stealth and more engaging assassinations from Valhalla, the wealth of cities from Odyssey, and the story from Origins. That's just me though. Anyways, Mirage sits nicely in B tier. So our final tier list is Revelations, Freedom Cry, and Unity in C tier. That's just average, right? Average Assassin's Creed games. Assassin's Creed 1, Liberation, and Mirage in B tier. So those are solid, above average. Brotherhood, Black Flag, Rogue, Syndicate, and Valhalla in A tier. Some of my favorites. And then AC2, AC3, Origins, and Odyssey in S tier. I'm pretty happy with that ranking. What do y'all think? Should I move Syndicate up to S? It's an A+ tier. No, I'll leave it where it is. I love Syndicate. But I feel like it's missing, like, it's almost a little bit paint by numbers in some ways. Like, it does everything pretty excellently, but I don't feel like it's on the same tier as like AC2, AC3, Origins, or Odyssey. But it feels like a step above Black Flag and Rogue and Brotherhood and Valhalla. I don't know, I'll leave it in A+ tier. So overall, the games are pretty good. No F or D tiers, because honestly, none of these games have ever been that bad. Alright, on to the rankings now, the final rankings. So I'm placing Mirage below Rogue and above the first game. Despite all my complaints, its modern improvements do make it more fun to play than the original game. That means our final rankings are Freedom Cry at 15, Unity at 14, Revelations 13, Liberation 12.
Editor Kanaju here. On second thought, I'm actually moving Liberation below Revelations. As you were.
Assassin's Creed at number 11, Mirage number 10, Rogue 9, Brotherhood 8, Valhalla 7, Black Flag 6, and then my personal top 5 Assassin's Creed games are Syndicate at 5th, Odyssey in 4th, AC2 3rd, AC3 2nd, and Origins is my number 1. Honestly, I could shuffle the order of these top 5 around a little, depending on the season, but all 5 are exceptional games. Odyssey sticks out as it's not the most Assassin's Creed of Assassin's Creeds, but like I said, it's my favorite RPG of all time, so credit where credit's due. Alrighty folks, it's me, 2024 Kanaju, back again. How did I do? Chances are you probably disagree with some or all of my rankings, but no worries. I know I tend to put setting above even story in my Assassin's Creed rankings, which I know many people would disagree with. So if a game has a really great setting, a really great historical fantasy, really great simulation, you know what I mean? I tend to really latch onto that and overlook if the story is a little bit weaker, right? But that said, I still hold gameplay and characters in very high regard, so I think I have that in common with most Assassin's Creed players. But anyways, those are all just my opinions. Go ahead and share yours in the comments below. After all, we're all Assassin's Creed enjoyers here, so I'm sure it'll be a nice, civil discussion. We each have our favorites and our gripes with how the series has developed, but personally I'm looking forward to Assassin's Creed Shadows. And hey, if this video does well, I would be willing to make a follow-up including Shadows and all 3 Chronicles games next year. Maybe even Nexus if I get a headset. Who's to say? Other than that, please check out my Assassin's Creed city ranking videos. I have one for each open world game and another for the colonial American cities in the series. The cities are probably my favorite parts of the series, so depending on the scale of Shadows, you might see another entry in that series very soon. Well, not very soon, like 6 months from now, but you know what I mean. If you made it this far, liking or disliking this video would be a huge help. Since my channel is mostly known for No Man's Sky content, YouTube does its best to bury my Assassin's Creed videos, despite my best efforts. If you can help me convince the algorithm to share these too, I'd be extremely grateful. Subscribing's free, channel memberships are cheap, and everything's appreciated. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!